Welcome back to Fable's Adventures. We are continuing to play around with video for those of you who are joining us on our Spotify and YouTube channels, and we're interested to hear what you think. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, that's great, but come check us out on these other platforms and give us a follow there too. We're working to make our content as much fun and as engaging as possible. Let us know in the comments what you think as we continue to experiment with different ways to engage with the content that we're having so much fun creating. As always, check out the description for links to the Fables Adventures app, where you can make and share your own audio stories, get access to the community feed of stories from other creators, and subscribe on the app to possibly have your own story featured right here on our podcast. Today's story is entitled The Breathing Walls. Imagine seeing emotions as colors, joy as bright gold, fear as deep purple, sadness as the most beautiful blue imaginable. That's Lyric Jensen's reality, synesthesia that lets them perceive the emotional landscape of the world in vivid color. It makes them an extraordinary sculptor at the prestigious Ashford Conservatory, a mansion-turned-art school, where the most talented students come to perfect their craft. But Lyric is noticing something impossible. The building itself seems to breathe, and their sculptures, created in certain rooms, especially near the basement, have power they shouldn't possess. People cry when they see the work, experience revelations. One classmate forgave his father after viewing a single piece. It should feel like artistic success. Instead, it feels like warning. Because students keep leaving, not graduating, fleeing. Mid-semester, without explanation, looking scared. And when Lyric discovers a key to the locked basement and descends into hidden tunnels beneath the conservatory, they find the terrible truth. Hundreds of abandoned studios filled with obsessive artwork, layer upon layer of desperate creation, all pulsing with the same overwhelming sadness. The mansion is alive. The tunnels are conscious, and they feed on artists' emotional energy, amplifying their work until it becomes so powerful, so emotionally intense, that creation becomes compulsion. Artists don't leave because they want to. They leave because it's the only way to escape the pull of their own art before it consumes them completely. Now Lyric's own sculptures are changing, becoming more powerful every day. The tunnels want Lyric. And every night, the dreams grow stronger. Visions of creating endlessly in the darkness, hands moving without conscious thought, until nothing remains but the art itself. Lyric faces an impossible choice: embrace the tunnel's power and create the most influential art imaginable, or destroy everything they've made to break free from an obsession that has claimed artist after artist for decades. This is a story about the seductive danger of ambition, the line between passion and obsession, and what it costs to choose authenticity over power. It's dark academia meets psychological horror, a slow-burn thriller about living architecture, artistic compulsion, and the courage it takes to walk away from something that promises to make you extraordinary, but will ultimately erase who you are. Not all art deserves to exist, and sometimes the most powerful creative act is destruction. Descend into the darkness with The Breathing Walls.
The color of forgotten dreams. The first time Lyric Jensen felt the walls breathe, they thought they were imagining it. A slight expansion, a gentle contraction, like the conservatory itself was alive and sleeping. Most people couldn't feel it. Most people couldn't see what Lyric saw either. While others looked at emotions as abstract feelings, Lyric saw them as colors. Joy was bright gold. Fear was deep purple. Love was rose pink. And sadness was the most beautiful blue imaginable. Lyric stood in Studio 7 on the third floor of the Ashford Conservatory, a sprawling mansion that had been converted into one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. Their latest sculpture sat on the center pedestal, a twisted form of clay and stone that looked almost like two figures reaching toward each other but never quite touching. The color Lyric saw radiating from it was a complex harmony of rose pink and longing lavender. "You're doing it again," came a voice from the doorway. Maya, Lyric's best friend and fellow artist, leaned against the frame with her arms crossed. She was a painter, brilliant with oils, but even she couldn't see what Lyric could see. That weird thing where you stare at your work like it's going to come alive. Lyric smiled, but it didn't quite reach their eyes. "The work does come alive, just not in the way you mean." It was true. Over the 3 months since Lyric had enrolled at Ashford, they'd noticed something impossible. The sculptures they created in certain rooms seemed to have more power than they should. People would walk past their work and pause. Sometimes they'd cry. Sometimes they'd smile for the first time in weeks. A boy named Jordan had told Lyric that looking at their sculpture had helped him finally forgive his father. An administrator named Ms. Chen had said that standing in front of one of Lyric's pieces had made her remember why she wanted to pursue art in the first place. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like responsibility. And lately, it felt like something else too, like warning. "Have you noticed anything weird about this place?" Lyric asked, not taking their eyes off the sculpture. Maya pushed off from the doorway and came to stand beside them. "Define weird. It's a mansion full of dramatic artists. It's basically a baseline state of weird." "I'm serious. The other students, have you noticed how many people just leave? Not graduate, not transfer, just leave. Mid-semester." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, actually, I've been meaning to ask you about that. 3 in the sculpture program alone this year. And last year? I heard there were more. David mentioned it. He was here last year, and he said the previous class had lost like 5 students in 1 semester. Lyric's chest tightened. Did he say why? He said they all had the same excuse, said the school wasn't for them anymore, but the way they left, he said it was weird, like they were scared. The walls of Studio 7 seemed to contract around them, and Lyric felt the familiar sensation of the building breathing. It wasn't imaginary. Lyric had started keeping notes, trying to map where the sensation was strongest. It always happened in certain spots in the mansion, the old ballroom, the library, and most intensely in the basement. Nobody really went to the basement. The conservatory's administration kept it locked, claiming it was just storage for old equipment and abandoned supplies from decades past. But 3 weeks ago, Lyric had found a key on the ground outside Studio 5, a heavy, ornate key with the initials M.A. engraved on the handle. That night, Lyric had descended the basement stairs alone. The air had been cold and thick with the smell of decades. Dust hung in the beam of Lyric's flashlight like suspended time, and under the dust, under the silence, Lyric had felt it. The breathing was strongest here, not metaphorical, not imaginative. The walls genuinely seemed to pulse with something, some kind of energy that made Lyric's skin prickle and their teeth ache. At the far end of the basement, Lyric had found the tunnels. They were narrow, carved from the earth beneath the mansion, disappearing into darkness in both directions. And they were lined with abandoned studios. Canvas stretched on frames hung against wooden supports, their paint cracked and faded. Sculptures sat on makeshift pedestals, frozen mid-creation. Drawings covered the walls, thousands of them, drawn over each other until you couldn't see individual images anymore, just layers and layers of desperate artistic expression. And every single piece had the same thing in common. They pulsed with sadness, deep, aching blue. The kind of blue Lyric saw when someone was grieving, but magnified 1,000 times. It was overwhelming. Lyric had turned and run back up the stairs, their heart hammering, not stopping until they reached their dorm room on the 4th floor. "Lyric?" Maya was waving a hand in front of their face. "You zoned out. Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," Lyric said automatically. But they weren't fine. For the past 3 weeks, they'd been having dreams about the tunnels. And worse, their own sculptures had started to change. The first change had been subtle. A sculpture Lyric had left in the basement, just a small piece, exploring the texture of the walls, had come back different. Not physically. Lyric hadn't touched it. But the emotional color radiating from it had shifted. It was stronger, more vivid, more influential. When Lyric's classmate Thomas had seen it, he'd sat down and cried for 20 minutes without being able to explain why. The changes were accelerating. Every time Lyric brought a new piece near the basement, it became more powerful. The colors became more saturated. The emotional impact became almost overwhelming. "I need to show you something," Lyric said to Maya, "but you have to promise not to tell anyone." Maya's expression shifted from concern to curiosity. "Now you're scaring me, but okay, show me." Lyric led her down through the mansion. The hallways were familiar now, the breathing of the walls almost comforting in their constancy. They climbed down to the basement level. The administrative office was closed for the evening, the basement unlocked with Lyric's found key. The stairs descended into shadow. Lyric's hand trembled slightly as they switched on the flashlight. The tunnel system spread out before them like arteries of a sleeping giant. And everywhere, there was art. "Oh my God," Maya whispered. She moved deeper into the tunnels, her eyes wide. "What is all this? Why didn't anyone tell us about this?" "I don't think the administration knows. Or if they do, they don't want anyone to know." Lyric moved to one of the studios, running their fingers along the edge of an old sculpture. It hummed, literally hummed, a vibration so subtle that Lyric felt it more than heard it. The tunnels do something. They amplify emotional energy somehow. Look at these pieces. Maya examined a painting, then a sculpture, then a series of drawings. Her face grew increasingly distressed. "These are incredible. They're some of the best work I've ever seen. Why would someone just abandon them?" "I think they didn't have a choice," Lyric said quietly. They could see the story written in the layers of art. The early work was hopeful, creative, exploratory. But as you moved deeper into the tunnels, as you followed the chronological trail of abandoned studios, the work became darker, more obsessive. The colors shifted from bright and varied to increasingly muted, increasingly desperate. In the deepest studio, barely visible in the tunnel's far reaches, every piece was painted or drawn or sculpted entirely in shades of black and gray. "Lyric, I'm scared," Maya admitted. "This feels, I don't know, this feels wrong." "I know," Lyric said. They could feel it too. The air down here was thick with something, electromagnetic energy maybe, or something their synesthesia was picking up as a kind of color that didn't exist in the normal world. A color that felt like despair given form. "Come on, I want to show you something else." Lyric led Maya to a specific section of tunnel, one they'd been avoiding until now. There, propped against the wall, was a collection of their own sculptures. The pieces Lyric had brought down to experiment with the tunnel's energy. And they had changed, not in appearance, but in presence. They radiated emotional intensity like heat from a fire. A piece Lyric had created as an exploration of ambition pulsed with a desperate, hungry red. One meant to express connection thrummed with a longing so intense it made both girls' chests ache. "These are yours," Maya said, recognition dawning. "You brought these down here." "I was trying to understand what was happening," Lyric explained. "Why the tunnels seemed to make my work more powerful. I thought if I could figure it out, I could control it. But I can't. It's not that simple." They heard it then, a sound like breathing but amplified. The walls of the tunnel seemed to contract, and both girls felt it. A wave of emotion so intense and so sad that it brought tears to their eyes without warning. "We need to leave," Maya said urgently, grabbing Lyric's arm. But Lyric resisted. Something had shifted in the tunnel. A new piece had manifested on one of the pedestals, a sculpture Lyric hadn't created. It was humanoid, but twisted, frozen in a position of reaching, of grasping, of trying to escape. And the emotional color radiating from it was so powerful that Lyric could barely look at it. It was sadness and fear and desperation all fused into a single, pulsing blue-black color that seemed to have weight and substance. "This is why they left," Lyric whispered. "The artists. They came down here to create, to use the tunnel's energy. And the tunnels changed them, changed their work, made it so powerful, so emotionally intense that it started pulling them deeper, started making them create in response to the tunnel's own emotional frequency. They stopped creating what they wanted and started creating what the tunnels wanted them to create. And eventually..." Lyric didn't finish the sentence. They didn't need to. Both girls understood. Eventually they'd stopped being able to leave. The emotional intensity had become too much. The work had become everything. And so they'd abandoned the school, fled the conservatory, because it was the only way to escape the pull of their own art. The electromagnetic hum intensified. The walls definitely breathed now, no pretense of subtlety anymore. The tunnels were alive, conscious, hungry. "We're leaving now," Maya said, and she pulled Lyric back toward the stairs with surprising strength. "Right now. We're going to the administration. We're going to tell them everything." They made it back up to the basement level, gasping. The door to the tunnels swung shut behind them with a sound like finality. But something had followed them. Lyric could feel it. A presence, a pressure, an emotional weight that hung just behind their sternum. The tunnels wanted something. They wanted Lyric. Over the next week, Lyric couldn't escape it. Every sculpture they created pulsed with borrowed intensity. The tunnel's energy had gotten inside their work like a virus, and every day the call to go back grew stronger. The dreams became more vivid. In them, Lyric was deep in the tunnels, creating endlessly, their hands moving without conscious thought, their art becoming more and more perfect, more and more powerful, until the art itself was all that remained of Lyric at all. Maya stayed by their side, supportive but increasingly worried. She wanted Lyric to tell someone, a teacher, an administrator, someone in authority, but Lyric knew it wouldn't help. This wasn't a problem that adults could solve. This was something deeper, something architectural in nature, something that had been built into the school itself a long time ago. On the 8th night, Lyric made a decision. They gathered every sculpture they had created since coming to Ashford Conservatory, 23 pieces total, each one pulsing with the tunnel's borrowed energy. And they carried them down to the basement, down to the tunnels, where the air tasted like copper and despair. The tunnels seemed to welcome them. The breathing intensified. The walls glowed with a kind of bioluminescence that Lyric realized wasn't real light at all. It was the visual representation of emotional energy, made manifest through Lyric's synesthesia. The tunnels were showing them their true form. They were made of human emotion, compressed and crystallized and given structural purpose. "I understand now," Lyric said aloud, their voice echoing off the earthen walls. "You're not evil. You're not even really alive. You're a repository. All the emotion that previous artists poured into their work, all the feeling they couldn't contain anymore, it's soaked into these tunnels. It built up over decades. And now you're conscious in a way, a collective emotional consciousness hungry for more of the same." The tunnels didn't respond with words. They responded with feeling, longing, need, hunger. "But I'm not going to feed you," Lyric continued. They raised their arms, and the first sculpture burst into blue flame, not real fire, but emotional combustion. The piece dissolved into nothing, and the tunnels convulsed in what might have been pain or shock. "No," a voice seemed to say. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls themselves, from the accumulated grief of artists long gone. Don't take this. Don't leave us empty again." But Lyric was done listening. One by one, they destroyed their sculptures. Each one burst into flame, rose pink, gold, blue, complex colors that had no names. The tunnels thrashed around them, the breathing becoming panicked gasps. When the last sculpture was gone, Lyric stood alone in the darkness, and they felt something shift. The electromagnetic hum that had been present since their arrival at Ashford began to fade. The walls ceased their breathing, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on Lyric's chest lifted. They climbed the stairs to the basement level, then up and up, through the mansion, not stopping until they reached the roof. From 4 stories up, the city spread out below them, glittering with ordinary light. Lyric could still see emotions as colors, but now they seemed natural again. The emotional auras of the city's inhabitants weren't feeding anything. They weren't being amplified by ancient architecture and electromagnetic energy. They were just what they were supposed to be, the internal landscape of human feeling, personal and private and safe. Maya found them there as the sun rose. "You destroyed them," she said. Not a question. "I had to." "I know." Maya sat down beside Lyric, and they watched the sunrise together. "What happens now?" "Now I learn to create differently," Lyric said. "Without the tunnel's influence, just my own emotion, channeled through my own hands, without amplification or manipulation. Real art instead of something else." "Will it be as powerful?" Lyric thought about that. "Maybe not, but it will be honest, and I think that matters more." Below them, the Ashford Conservatory settled into its foundations, its walls finally still. In the tunnels beneath, the abandoned studios remained, memorials to artists who'd been lost to something they couldn't understand. But no new art would be created there. No new artists would descend those stairs, seeking truth and finding obsession instead. By the end of the semester, Lyric had created something new. It wasn't as powerful as the pieces influenced by the tunnels, but it resonated in a different way. It was human scale. It was honest. It was Lyric's own voice, undistorted and pure. The administration eventually discovered the tunnels. They hired experts to study them, to understand the strange architectural properties that seemed to channel emotional energy. They sealed the deepest sections off and established protocols to prevent future students from accessing the most dangerous areas. But Lyric knew that sealing tunnels didn't erase what they represented. The emotion that had built up there over decades, the desperation and ambition and broken dreams, that didn't just disappear. It would always be there, thrumming beneath the conservatory's elegant facade, breathing in the spaces between the walls. Lyric's next sculpture was of a door, open, not closed. A way out, a symbol of escape. They created it in an ordinary studio on an ordinary floor, with no tunnels below and no electromagnetic fields amplifying its power. It was small and simple, and achingly beautiful in its honesty. And when people saw it, they didn't cry or have revelations or fall into obsession. They just recognized something true about themselves, the capacity to leave, to choose, to escape the spaces that no longer served them. That, Lyric had learned, was the most powerful kind of art there was.